Our entire episode today is a deep dive on LSU football coach Brian Kelly. I'm Ruddy Rutledge, and this here is some Bayou football. Welcome all. I'm Ruddy Rutledge, and he's Arthur, the party dog. Before we get to the LSU football and the LSU football coach, first, I would like to point out that this episode is kind of sort of a big deal to us because it's our 20th episode. Now, I realize that's not very many, but I like to think I've learned something, at least in the 20 times we've done this, and it's been fun. Fun fact, the party dog here has not been in the co-host chair for every episode. I had a different co-host. And what did I learn from that experience? Well, I learned...
Cheat! Because I quit.
Oh, really?
For good.
I learned don't spend too much on podcast equipment and don't ever work with family. My sister and former co-host, Rosie Rutledge Higginbottom, still writes for our website, BayouFootball.com. She wrote a nice piece on Kellen Moore when he was hired. Y'all check it out. And I understand her first ever erotic romance novel, Pulsating Hankerings, is set for publication in 2026. Congrats, Rosie. She says her dialogue is sassy. That's great. But no matter what Rosie may have started to think here recently, Arthur is not giving up the co-host chair. Sure, he's been incapacitated for a couple of shows, likes his Miller High Life, and for that, he apologizes. To absolutely no one. Speaking of incapacitated, Saturday night in Death Valley will be here before you know it. And the Saturday night when LSU plays Clemson in the fake Death Valley will be here even sooner than that. So let's do this. LSU Tiger football and the LSU Tiger football coach. And we'll start with the position of LSU football coach, its importance, and then move on to the individual currently holding office. But first, let's briefly touch on this year's situation. I've previously discussed what the Tiger fan base in general expects out of this team this season, and that's to make the college football playoff. Media's on board too, very high on the possibility of the Tigers getting in this year. And if you look at the roster, you can see why. This roster got a makeover this offseason. Got an upgrade. A lot of upgrades. 18 well-paid transfers, many of them starters within the SEC. And they'll join up with a solid group of returning players. Garrett Nussmeier, Aaron Anderson, Caden Durham, Tre'Dez Green, Jacobian Guillory, Harold Perkins, Whit Weeks. And then you throw in some five-star freshmen who likely aren't going to be denied playing time. It's an impressive roster. And each individual position group appears adequately stocked on paper. The O-line is young and inexperienced, but it's still stacked with talent, more so than it has been in a long time, actually. So I watch the media coverage on the Tigers, and I see them going on and on about the playoff. And most of them, not all, some of them know what's up, but most of them are debating whether or not this LSU team can get in the playoff. And I think it's just a bit short-sighted. Yeah. I'm just saying, LSU fans by nature, they want to go all the way. The full Monty. They want to bake the sweet potato. They want the national championship. And for this pleasure, this gratification that LSU football fans have experienced several times these past couple decades, who do they look to? Well, who does any team look to? I guess I should ask, who do Tiger fans hold accountable? I should say, who do they point their finger at when they don't get it? When they don't eventually get their trophy-raising climax? The LSU head football coach, of course. The HMFIC. And this modern LSU fan base, good salt of the earth, balls and ballettes that they are, They've gotten too familiar with championship football in this century to just go back to mediocrity and take it, like the Gators did a long time ago. Hey, what do you say to a Florida football player dressed in a nice suit? Will the defendant please rise? But here at LSU, if the head coach is not in the mix for championships, Tiger fans are going to raise hell, pull donations. That's the nature of the beast. And before you know it, that coach's ass will then be squatted and punted into the street, right there on the corner of Nicholson and Dalrymple. Yes, it's that serious, and yes, it's happened several times just like that. I swear. Ask Leslie Miles. Ask Jerry DiNardo, and that was back in the 90s before all the recent success. I heard they nearly broke DiNardo's tailbone when they tossed him into the street. Rumor has it, it was a couple of cassette tapes in his back pockets that cushioned his fall, saved his tailbone, his coccyx. Imagine that. I was told it was Ghost Town DJs and LL Cool J. Big old butt. The single. I wonder what the current coach keeps in his back pockets. Because it's going to matter if he loses 4 games again. The storm is finally lifted for now, and Arthur's taking an early beer break. Let's get to the meat and taters now and shift our focus to the individual, the man who has his finger on not the nuclear football. That's a very poor choice of wording. Let's say he has his finger on the pulse of football on the Bayou. On BAYOU Football. Hey. But Louisiana, the Bayou State, locks in on this man's performance every Saturday, every fall Saturday. This man's job performance. His name's Brian Keith Kelly, and he's the head football coach at LSU. And the key word of our deep dive today is pleasure. Of course it is. Isn't that what we want as fans? So yeah, pleasure. And derivatives and conjugations and variations thereof. Pleased, pleasing, pleased, pleasured. I doubt I use pleasured. Never know. And we're going to start with Kelly's 2025 season, specifically, and how crucial it is for his derriere. And then we'll look long-term, big picture. So, like I've said in the past, I try my darndest to present views from a purely fan perspective. And we all know LSU fans are demanding an appearance in the college football playoff this season, heading into the season. So, piggybacking off of that, I'm asking today, what final result from Brian Kelly this season would please Tiger fans? Here's what I mean. What would it take from Kelly's Tigers this season where LSU fans, after the season's over, they look at BK and say, that's our coach. That's our HMFIC. That's our guy. What final result would get us all there? Or most of us. Some fans are already all in on Kelly. Many others are a long way away. And then there's a few that are never going to get there no matter what happens. Also, if you don't know what HMFIC is, it stands for Head Melon Farmer in Charge, for future references. Kelly Farms, Everett, Massachusetts. They grow big, juicy melons. Having missed the playoff last year and now having a revamped roster, the pressure is on Kelly, yes. But just making the playoff at the bare minimum, that might not be enough to please this fan base. That might not be good enough to get them fully behind Kelly. How about this scenario? The Tigers make the playoff, but get bounced in the first round in a 2-touchdown loss to Penn State. Or worse, Notre Dame. That would be technically meeting expectations for the season, technically making the playoff. But with a final result like that, fans would be livid at Brian Kelly. Well, maybe not the derpy LSU fans. The delusional ones who take every loss and spin it into sunshine and blackberry wine. We made the playoff. Yay. Mission accomplished. Meanwhile, the 95%ers, the 96%ers, not happy Tigers with a result like that. So when people loudly proclaim, Brian Kelly has to make the playoffs, as if they're unveiling some profound take, it's like, thanks. Gracias, Capitan Obvio. Everybody knows that. But even then, if he does get in, that still might not be good enough. I'm not talking firing job security, but getting the fans fully behind him, pleased with him as LSU coach going forward. And he might very well accomplish that this season, get the fans behind him, which would be big for him. So yeah, this season is critical for Kelly, remarkably critical, in that it could literally end him at LSU, but it could also be the season he earns his Tiger stripes. So how about it? How can BK earn his Tiger stripes? How can he win the fan base over this season? Forget about him keeping his job, but what would it take specifically for the majority of the LSU fan base after the season to say, Brian Kelly, that's our head melon farmer in charge, and I'm glad to have him here? Does he need to win a playoff game? Win the SEC? Make a national semifinal? How about show some improvement over the course of the season? Yeah, he's going to have to do more than that. Right now, currently, we're at now, I feel like LSU fans are almost split down the middle on Kelly as coach. Just my opinion, and it really depends on what platform you're on and where you go in real life, of course. And this might trend towards Kelly's favor the closer we get to the season. You know, positivity always ticks up the closer and closer you get to kickoff. Maybe the Tiger fans down on Kelly right now are just the loudest. But either way, it's safe to say this coach has work to do. But I remember, and we are diving into his LSU tenure now, I remember not so long ago when the fans largely viewed BK favorably. This was right after year one at LSU, right after 2022, his first season in Baton Rouge. The Tigers won 10 games, won the West, played in the SEC Championship, beat Bama in a classic game in Tiger Stadium. Not a bad first year after going 6-7 the year before under Coach O. First losing season in over 20 years. 38 scholarship players left on the roster at the end of the season. Kelly came in, injected some much-needed discipline and accountability into this program. And yes, maybe too much so, being that some say his Tiger teams play like robots. And I tend to agree. Sometimes they do. But I'd never describe discipline as a problem, although it looks like there might be too much of something going on. But it really was an impressive first-year turnaround for Kelly at LSU. And since then, it's been a decline. Slightly downhill, a slight decline, like this. Not a free fall, but still a decline. Kelly followed up his first season in Baton Rouge by fielding a national championship level offense with a Heisman winner in 2023. Number one offense in the country in every category. Good, right? Just had a slight problem in that his defense ranked like 118. Disgraceful under Matt House, who was hired by Brian Kelly. Kelly doesn't get a pass for hiring Matt House. But thanks to the incredible offense, the Tigers still managed to get 10 wins out of that season. And then last season, year 3, under Kelly, LSU improved defensively under new coordinator Blake Baker, but not enough. This time the win total dipped, 9-4. And Kelly's follow-up to that 9-4 season begins August the 30th at Clemson, and if he loses 4 again, he's getting fired. Fired. That's a Justin Wilson guarantee. I don't give a damn what the buyout would be. $60 million last year, so probably 50, I guess. Doesn't matter. 4 losses, game over. That's it. BK, start making your way. Uncool. So back to our big question, pleasing the fan base, getting them fully behind Kelly. What final result would do that? Again, I don't know if that can specifically be answered today other than the one specific answer. Of course, there's really only one surefire specific way to answer this question. I talked about it a little earlier before we got to him, but I want to say it once again and tie it specifically to Kelly this time. LSU sports, as we've all seen recently, Tigers go for gold, not slots on tournament brackets. And some folks, not all, but some, are so caught up in whether or not Kelly can finally get a car on the track and achieve this minimal milestone, making a 12-team playoff, they're missing the big picture. It's not about getting a car on the track. Kelly's true goal is gold. That's why he's at LSU, and that is the standard he should be held to. And when you consider the loaded roster he'll have this season, like we mentioned, and also the other advantages, like, for instance, playing in the most terrifying stadium in America, and then you add in the super talented, super confident senior quarterback to that mix, those don't come around often, and you start to think this year might be his best chance to do it, to win the race, finally get his hands on that 24-karat gold trophy. You know, the one he left Notre Dame to come down here and raise. That one. Long term, some people think Kelly will eventually win the big one at LSU, and some don't. And that's what I want to go into next. Can BK win the big one, the national title at LSU? Does he have the ability to get it done? Not necessarily. Well, we had a mid-show delivery that I had been looking forward to and needing. A new light. Looks like a mini toilet seat. Look at that, Arthur. Think you could take a shit through the middle of that? Better? We're evolving, improving. We'll have to experiment with it, I'm sure. So back to Flying Brian. Can he get it done? Not necessarily talking 2025, but just simply, can he win one at LSU? Although 2025 may be his best shot. I wish I could say yes, but I can't. Not today. Not yet. But if you're trying to figure a coach out, never hurts to look into his past. So back we go into Kelly's coaching past. And for the most part, Brian Kelly's track record is uninterestingly impressive, but it can also be unimpressively interesting at times. The son of a local Massachusetts politician, Kelly's been a head coach for most of his coaching career. He has a mostly offensive background as an assistant, but he became a head coach at age 29, and he's been one ever since. So he likes being the boss, but he's always been more hands-on with offense versus defense. Took over at Grand Valley State first, 1991. Eventually won back-to-back Division II national championships. So, interestingly enough, Kelly got a taste for national titles, multiple national titles, very early in his head coaching career. And unimpressively, he has not tasted one since. After big success at Grand Valley, he made like George and Wheezy Jefferson and moved on up to Division I, Central Michigan. Built a name for himself there, running a wide-open spread offense, but he did not turn CMU into a winner till he began to shift his pass-heavy spread to a more balanced offensive attack. And this marked, as far as I can tell, a shift, a turning point in his offensive philosophy. After 2006, Kelly left CMU and moved on up again, this time to a mid-major, Cincinnati. as you might guess, turned that program around as well. And when he left for the Notre Dame job in 2009, he had an undefeated football team. So then Kelly accepts what is, I'm sure, a dream job of many Irish Catholic football coaches from the Northeast. The head coaching position at the University of Notre Dame. However, when Kelly got to South Bend, this was a very interesting time because the media narrative was, can't win at Notre Dame anymore. It's a dead program. It's been dead. You can't recruit there. They fired their 3 previous coaches. Well, he had Notre Dame 12-0, playing for their first national title since 1988 in year 3 on the job. And no, Kelly's Irish did not belong on the field with Saban's Tide in that BCS title game. They were completely outclassed. He coached the Irish from 2010 to 2021, and in South Bend, Kelly relied on a ball control offense that usually featured a mammoth offensive line, which was right in line with what he needed to do to win at Notre Dame. It was based on the talent available to him under whatever academic restrictions Notre Dame had in place, I don't know, and under the limited talent available to him in close distance to bumfuck Indiana, which was not a lot, I do know that. He had to recruit the nation. His last roster at Notre Dame had players from 17 different states. What Kelly's Irish teams lacked in top-end team speed, they made up for it with physicality and execution. But for whatever reason, that physicality and plain old toughness is something that has just not translated to his teams at LSU. And this is a big damn problem. Thump between the tackles. All over the field, for that matter, intensity. Brian Kelly's LSU teams need more violence in their lives. This is the single biggest head scratcher of his time here in Baton Rouge. How have the Tigers not been able to consistently run the ball between the tackles? Got better last year when Caden Durham got involved, but it needs to be there from the word go this year. Kelly, 12 seasons at Notre Dame, won 10 or more games 7 times, won at least 11 games 4 times, made the 4-team playoff twice, and made a BCS national title game. And in his final season there, he passed Newt Rockne to become Notre Dame's all-time winningest coach. So he can rack up W's, but is Brian Kelly a bad coach in big games, as is the narrative? Maybe. But I know Notre Dame lost those playoff games on talent disparity in that BCS game. Plain for all to see, they were beaten when they got off the bus. No shot versus Bama or Clemson. Now, if you bring up his record versus ranked teams as a head coach, all stops combined, you got something there. It's 35-37. That is not good. Nick Saban, he ain't. However, that losing record places him 4th in the SEC among active coaches. That's current SEC coaches' win percentage versus ranked teams as a head coach. DeBoer has a small sample size. Then there's a big drop-off after Kirby, but Kelly ranks 4th in the league. Kiffin's 11-24, and that includes his time at USC. Newsflash, it's hard to beat good teams consistently, especially in the SEC. Mississippi State's coach is Ofer. Anyway, so the call comes, and Kelly then decides in late 2021 to make the jump to Lanyap Land, where he quickly learns to peel crawfish and make groceries. And no, I'm not going to skim over it. Marcus Freeman's Irish rolled through the playoff last season. Stomped Georgia. Notre Dame fans on X didn't let LSU fans go a moment without a gentle reminder. And after that fantastic run through the playoffs, Marcus Freeman still has the same record as Brian Kelly in national championship games. Gentle reminder. How massive would a Kelly versus Freeman LSU Notre Dame playoff matchup be? Bigger than Christmas. It could happen right around Christmas. So a look into Kelly's coaching past reveals an impressive resume. That's not debatable. He's won everywhere he's been. 31 seasons as a head coach, 29 winning seasons, 31 seasons as a coach. But it's still kind of bland, his resume. Other than a couple of D2 titles, that was a long time ago now. And most importantly, it doesn't reveal anything that tells us that he's especially suited to win the national championship at LSU. Actually, as of today, you could easily make the claim LSU's been Brian Kelly's most disappointing stop on his head coaching resume. Of course, that can change this year in a really big way. Things can change in a heartbeat, especially at a place like LSU. Trying a different light shade for this segment. And this program is what I want to hit on next. The potential of the LSU football program. Let's just say it speaks well to Kelly's chances to win the big one. Please do not forget, 3 different head coaches have raised national title trophies in the modern era, the last 22 years or so. And these 3 national championship winning coaches were quite different from each other. Point being, LSU is a potent program with a lot of advantages. There's no one blueprint to winning here, no one set blueprint. There's multiple ways to skin this cat, this big fat jungle cat. Nick Saban, last name Eva, first name greatest, is the first modern era coach to take advantage of LSU's resources, saw what the program would be when few others did, and he set it up for all kind of future success. Then he left. But another of LSU's championship-winning football coaches perhaps demonstrated the potency of this program more than any other coach. Leslie Edwin Miles, hear me out. Les Miles wasted talent, ate grass, picked boogers, acted like Rain Man at press conferences and in games, and won a national championship. Should have won more, but during his prime years, the LSU program was operating at a higher level than any other program not named Bama under Saban, with Les at the helm. Of course, it didn't last. The luck ran out. Miles is the coach who proved it's possible to be both hard-headed and soft-headed all at once. Proved it regularly on fall Saturdays. Played April Fool's jokes on 90,000 people in October. If he were LSU's coach today, I would swear Les Miles was 100% AI creation. The odd persona, the quirkiness, the decision-making, everything. But Miles' continued success for a time showcased the potency of the LSU program. Proved LSU could bring home national title trophies and compete for titles, not only with the greatest of all time leading the way, but with a guy who eats grass and booger casserole, and who Brian Kelly coached circles around in a game, 2014 Music City Bowl. Of course, Miles is not the last coach to take advantage of the absurd potential of the program. LSU football claims the greatest team ever, team that was coached by a man who's likely eaten tree bark and gargled gravel within the past week, and who, to this day, apparently goes hard at weddings. Hard. And I liked Coach O, I did. Got the t-shirt. He took this program to the pinnacle, and then he drove it straight off a cliff faster than you could say, roll tide, what? But the important thing to draw from this, the program, the way all the pieces came into place for that 2019 team so suddenly, so perfectly, that was scary. It just came together. The LSU head coach has every advantage he needs, all the way down to favorable geography on the recruiting trail. You don't have another in-state rival to recruit against. You can recruit the I-10 corridor from Houston into Florida, which is loaded with talent. You just got to pay them now, a lot. At his previous job, Kelly might have had to fly halfway across the country to convince a big-time player at a position of need to just consider visiting South Bend, Indiana. Now he can literally hop in his car, pick a direction, any direction, take off driving, run into a 4-star edge rusher within an hour or two. Now he can walk outside, sling a cat in any direction, and hit a two-way athlete with D1 track speed. I'm not suggesting Brian Kelly or anybody else sling cats. From what I understand, he wasn't too happy with Notre Dame's facilities. That's not a problem for him anymore. Now, he can't sling a cat without hitting a state-of-the-art modern facility. All that being said, it's about time for Brian to sling together a playoff run. Arthur's back, almost sober. Now, I know the counter to the analogies and the comparisons, whatever you want to call them, to the former coaches who won at LSU. It's a different game now than when they won here. Yes, of course it is. I understand the game is quite different now. It's different now than it was when Brian Kelly took this job in 2022. But he has traits as a head coach that should help him with all this ongoing constant change. From everything I can gather, he's big on attention to detail. That's good. He appears intelligent, needs to be. He handles the media with the skill of a politician, for whatever that's worth. Probably something. He had a good track record for hiring assistants, defensive coordinators in particular at Notre Dame, but the Matt House hire is a huge black mark as far as that goes on Kelly. His worst mistake at LSU by a country mile. But we can still technically call it an outlier for now. He promotes player leadership within the team, players holding each other accountable on the field and off. So what's been the problem? What is the problem? I think, other than having mediocre talent at multiple positions on defense the past 3 seasons, when you break it down to the bare bones, there's been a lack of intensity, a lack of energy in Baton Rouge. Like I said earlier, LSU has not played with the energy, the physicality, especially in the running game between the tackles, that we expected when he came here. Really all over the field, though. That has to change August 30th, 6:30. Contrary to what some fans think, I don't think Kelly has had trouble adjusting to the SEC. Won the West, beat Saban and Bama his first year here. I think a bigger issue than that for him was LSU arriving late to the NIL party, the pay-for-play party. And that's not going to be an issue this season. See current roster. They're paid a competitive wage now. I'm going to say this till opening kickoff. This is the roster Brian Kelly left Notre Dame for. So much speed. And if things go bad this year, then we'll cook his ass and punt him into the street just like the others. I said earlier I didn't think we could answer this other than the obvious answer of winning the national championship. But now I think I can answer my original question. How can BK please the fan base this year? It's not a specific result like winning the title. And I'm not speaking for all the fans, of course, obviously. But for me, I, Ruddy Rutledge, as an LSU fan in 2025, would be pleased with Brian Kelly as head coach of the Bayou Bengals if the Tigers would get back to playing physical, high energy, high intensity LSU football. Bring back the intensity. Bring back the energy. Jerry DiNardo brought back the magic in 1995. That's before you were born, Arthur. 30 years later, Brian Kelly needs to bring back the intensity in 2025. If he can. Violence. With this roster, if that happens, with this roster, look out. If this team is the more tougher, physical team week in and week out, big things are coming. It's been missing for Kelly's entire time here. I hate to say the kind of ball LSU played under Miles, because I don't want the archaic offense back or the game management screw-ups, but I'll take the physicality. LSU won a lot of games during that era with elite athletes playing high-energy physical ball. You might not be able to best Nick Saban, but you can win a lot of games with that combo, even if your coach is a jelly-headed weirdo with an IQ of 79. And LSU now, for the first time since 2019, has the athletes again. And Brian Kelly, HMFIC, has the athletes and the money and the facilities and the support staff and the fan support. What Brian Kelly no longer has, excuses. And that concludes our study, our omnibus deep dive on LSU coach Brian Kelly. Kind of. Me personally, I like dessert, but not every night. So with that in mind, we cooked up a little something different to end this, our 20th episode. One of my favorite things in the world is reading stories to my little niece. Story time with Uncle Ruddy. And Alice in Wonderland is one of her favorites. That one and Where the Wild Things Are, and David and Goliath. But recently I came across a very interesting adaptation of a famous children's story. And I'd like to share that short story with you fine balls and ballettes, the LSU football fan base, here today. So hit pause real quick. Gather the kids around the TV or device. There will be no more foul language or sexual innuendo. The story is titled, Brian's Adventures in BayouLand. Brian was a little boy of about 12 years old, who lived in a dull little place called Leprechaun Land. And he had a little sandbox that he played in with his little toys. And one day, little Brian, he got bored with his sandbox and his basic little wooden toys. And so little Brian became curious. He wanted to know what other sandboxes there were out there in the world. He wondered what it was like to play with toys made of gold. He'd be just happy to hold one, a shiny toy made of gold, and raise it up to the sky with both hands like a conquering hero. One day, little Brian was extra curious, playing alone in his sandbox, when he stood up and said out loud, "I wish I could hold a shiny plaything made of gold. I wish I could leave Leprechaun Land for good." It was right then that Brian noticed it out of the corner of his eye, a possum walking out of the woods close to Brian's home. The possum was purple, and it was carrying something shiny and gold. Brian soon realized that it was a shiny golden football. He really wanted to get that ball. The possum then gave Brian a funny grin and ran off back in the other direction, back into the thick forest. Brian had to get his hands on that shiny golden football. So curious little Brian hopped out of his sandbox, out of his comfort zone, and followed the purple possum all the way into the dark forest. Brian hadn't gone far into the woods when suddenly, just as he stepped past a tree root, he stepped in a deep hole, a crawfish hole, and fell in and kept falling and falling. So little Brian tumbled and tumbled deeper and deeper down the crawfish hole until he finally reached the bottom. Now he was in the middle of another forest, but things were different, very different from what he was used to. This forest was much hotter, and the air was so thick he could barely breathe. Brian knew he wasn't in Leprechaun Land anymore. Suddenly, he heard a voice high above him. "Some say I don't talk like I be from Chalmette. What some say might be correct, aight?" Perched on a tree limb sat a great, big, talking cat. "Who are you?" Brian asked. "What are you?" "I'm the Chalmette cat, and you don't belong down here in BayouLand, and that's a fact." "I'm in BayouLand?" Brian exclaimed. "No way!" Little Brian had heard legends of BayouLand, stories of a wild and wacky place where up was down and down was up and everything was strange and different. Brian hoped BayouLand would get better because he already didn't care much for this cat. "I'm looking for where the grass is greener," Brian exclaimed. "I know what you really want, little leprechaun ball," the cat replied. "You after that purple possum and the shiny gold football." "Well, yeah," Brian admitted. "I want to take it home and show it to my family." Strangely, the cat then burst into laughter. "You can't be talking like that in BayouLand, little ball. Try saying that last word again like you belong down here, aight?" So Brian said the word again and again, trying his best to fit in. "I want to show my family. And again the cat burst into laughter. He had tricked Brian, and he was making fun of how the boy talked. And so Brian then began to cry, and he took off, running away into the woods, wiping away tears as the Chalmette cat laughed himself to sleep. Brian got far away from the cat, and as he walked through the woods, he noticed that the grass in BayouLand was in fact greener. Suddenly, two strange-looking men popped out from behind a tree. They were both dressed very well. One wore a nice blue suit. The other wore a red suit. "Hello there," they said together at once. "Hi," Brian said, relieved to see a talking human in this wild and wacky place where up was down and down was up and everything was strange and different. "I'm looking for the purple possum." The two men laughed loudly, very loudly. It instantly caused an uneasiness in Brian. The two men then spoke again, together, at the same time, again. "We are Tweedle Jeff and Tweedle John. We are the governors of BayouLand. We know what's best for everyone, so we rule everyone." At once, all the little critters nearby in the forest then laughed out loud. But Brian was confused. "Tweedle Jeff and Tweedle John? I've only heard of Tweedledee and Tweedledum." "We're both Tweedledum," the governor said. "But right now you need to do what's right, little ball. You gotta dance with us because, you see, nobody makes it in BayouLand unless you dance with the governor." So Brian began dancing the very best he could. But right away, the governors and all the little critters in the woods pointed and laughed at him. "Look at that little ball who can't dance," they said. "He's trying way too hard." Tears began to well up in little Brian's eyes. But right then, he saw the purple possum prancing by. And so Brian wiped his eyes, left the dumb governors to their games, and took off again, chasing after the purple possum with the shiny golden football. Brian couldn't quite catch the possum, but he ran upon an extraordinary sight nonetheless. There, in the middle of the woods, was a gentleman wearing a tall white hat. He was standing next to a picnic table, and he appeared to be holding a party by himself. The man noticed young Brian approaching and spoke up. "I have a want for you to join my party." He had an odd manner of speaking. "It's not St. Patrick's Day," the man continued. "That's a different day entirely." Even a youth like Brian could tell the man was not quite right in the head. The Mad Hatter, as Brian later called him, then began dumping something onto serving plates. "Is this a tea party?" Brian asked. "Happy Columbus Day," the Mad Hatter replied. "We have a smorgasbord to taste, alfalfas, fescues, lemongrasses. You must have a want to taste them." "Grass?" Brian asked. "You're eating grass?" "I resent the fact that we were the nail," the Mad Hatter replied. "I have no interest in talking to anybody. Thank you very much. Have a great day." He then sat at his table and ate all the grass, all of it, and then he began to eat the ceramic plates the grass had been served on. The Mad Hatter, quite frankly, was just too weird. And so Brian listened to his gut and sneaked off without the Mad Hatter even noticing. As Brian walked alone again through the dark, scary woods, he began to think maybe the cat was right. Maybe he didn't belong here in this wild and crazy place where up was down and down was up and everything was strange and different. He couldn't talk like them. He couldn't dance like them. He couldn't catch the possum. And he couldn't hold the golden football. He began to cry again. "I wish I had never come to BayouLand." Now that boy be talking that talk him. Brian knew that voice. The Chalmette cat was perched on a limb just above him. He knew there was more the cat wasn't telling him. Something about the cat seemed oddly familiar to little Brian. "Who are you?" Brian asked. "Whoa, now I told you I'm the Chalmette cat, him, aight." But Brian was becoming wiser the longer he remained in BayouLand. "No," the boy argued. "Who are you really? I don't think you're from where you say you're from." "Oh, I'm just a fool who's way better at BayouLanding than you'll ever be, aight? I didn't used to laugh this much, though. You may be right about that. And maybe I be changing up my talking, and maybe I don't." "You know what?" Brian was fed up with the cat. "I don't care about BayouLand. I don't care about you or that stupid possum. I just want to go home to my family." Brian then looked up and realized that his surroundings had changed. He was now in the middle of a stadium of some type, an arena, and ball players were playing a game in front of a large crowd. On the sideline, a woman sat up on a high throne. She wore purple and gold sequin robes, and upon her head of golden hair rested a sequined crown. The woman noticed Brian and quickly gave a nod. Suddenly the boy was seized by the queen's guards and thrown down before her at the foot of her throne. "I am the Queen of Root," she proclaimed, "the sequined queen of BayouLand, and ye have entered into our realm in secret and talking funny. You did not dance with our governors. You turned your nose up at our food, and you've tried too hard to fit in." Just then the Chalmette cat reappeared, resting confidently underneath the sequin queen's throne, grinning at Brian from ear to ear. Brian glared at the cat as the queen continued. "You do not belong here," she declared. "So I sentence you, little ball, to a crawfish boil with the rougarou." The crowd of people then let out a loud gasp. "Can I say I'm sorry, Miss Queen?" Brian asked, but the queen made it known her decision was final. "Free the rougarou," she commanded. "Turn him loose. Something filet this way comes." "What's a rougarou?" Brian asked, and at that moment the boy found out. A booming voice bellowed out from behind a large cypress tree. "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I want that Joe Brady offense, yum." A gigantic, terrifying beast appeared. The monster's skin was leathery and burnt crispy brown by the bright sun from running shirtless through BayouLand for countless hours. Upon the top of his enormous square head was a mat of spikes, dark as a moonless BayouLand summer night. "I'm coming, and I ain't backing down. The Rougarou then raised his gigantic fist and punched out his own teeth, sending them flying into the swampy waters of the bayou. "Don't need no teethus to suck them crawfish heads," the Rougarou explained, looking young Brian right in the eyes. "I'ma take you to the fishing hole." This was too much for the boy. Young Brian yelled out in terror and took off running again, but this time he could not escape them. As he ran through the woods, he turned to look behind him, and there was the Rougarou and the Sequin Queen running after him, hot on his heels. There was also the Mad Hatter running beside the governors, Tweedle Jeff and Tweedle John, all chasing after him. And right beside Brian, running right alongside him, laughing the whole way, was that darn Chalmette cat. "You thought you could make it through BayouLand, a leprechaun ball. The purple possum was never real him. 'Twas me this whole time. The big gold football's real though, but you'll never touch it, not you, nope." At that point, Brian didn't care if they all caught up to him. He stopped, grabbed the Chalmette cat by the neck, and started to squeeze away. When suddenly, little Brian heard another voice. "Coach, Coach, wake up. It's go time." Brian suddenly awakened. He was sitting at a desk somewhere in a small office inside a huge stadium. He wasn't a 12-year-old boy any longer, but a 63-year-old man. As head master footballer in charge, Brian currently lives in BayouLand. He's been there for years and years, but still hasn't mastered it, and he's still chasing the shiny golden football. But today's a new day, and Brian is thinking to himself, "I'm so glad I fell down that crawfish hole years ago. I love BayouLand, where up is down and down is up and everything is strange and different." But Big Brian then gets nervous. "I hope my team's prepared," he says. "Is this finally the year I get the shiny golden football? Is this finally the year of Brian?" Then he leads his team out onto the field. How does the story unfold? Check back in January for part 2 of Brian's adventures in BayouLand. We'll let you know if Brian gets his hands on the shiny golden football, if the story continues, or if Brian's story in BayouLand comes to the end. Please like and subscribe. For Arthur, the Bayou Party Dog, I'm Ruddy Rutledge. He is a real good boy, and this is some Bayou football.